Whether we've met or not, I just want to encourage you to not miss out on what God's doing here. God can be doing so much, and if we don't lean in and engage, it won't really matter. And I just want to thank Seth, you, as well as the rest of the team for how you guys lead us. Man, just getting our hearts ready, allowing God to work through you. It can take a lot of work to learn how to live well with someone. Would you agree? Would you just raise your hand if that's true? Like you actually, like that's the reason why you live alone? That's because you know it just takes a lot of work. I mean, whether it's a roommate or you just get married and you move in with your husband or your wife. Anyone ever had the privilege, like, you grew up with a sibling and you shared a room with a sibling, but in adulthood, they needed you to share a room with them again? Like that happened? Anybody? And you're like, you were just better at 7. Your habits, like we were alike. When Shauna and I got married, we had never, I don't know why this is an issue, but we had never lived in the same time zone as each other. Ever when we got married. So there were just a couple of things we had to adjust to. I mean, it's crazy. When you begin to live with someone, you know and you learn that not everyone does things exactly the way you do things, which means they do it wrong. And it just takes some getting used to know how to live well with another person. It can be challenging. And while that is challenging, let me ask you this. Which one is more difficult? Learning how to live well with someone or learning how to live well without someone? And this is what I want to get to today. This is what I want to go after today. I'm talking about real people. I'm talking about learning to live well with the parent who's been in your life from day one. I'm talking about learning to live without the man or woman who said they would be a committed husband or wife to you for the rest of your life. I'm talking about the friend you used to be able to count on and thought you always would be able to count on. I'm talking about the sibling that you could always just pick up the phone and dial them right away. That's who I'm talking about. And yet I'm also talking about another class of people. I'm not just talking about the actual people you've had in your life. I'm talking about the idea of people you've had in your life. I mean, guys, some of you just knew in your future there would be a wife, and yet you're learning to live without it because there hasn't been. Some of you ladies, you knew there were babies that would call you mommy, and there hasn't been that yet. Some of you knew there were friends waiting when you arrived and moved to San Francisco, but that so far has not been your reality. Many of us have already had to learn what I'm about to tell you, but all of us are going to have this in our future, and here it is. We will have to live without someone we never imagined living without. God's going to do something in this moment, and it's also going to provide something for you and I to keep looking back to today, because unfortunately, it's weird. As people were telling me thank you through tears after the last service, I just told them, I hate that we have to talk about this. I hate that I've got to spend my message today getting you ready to face more loss in your life. But because you're going to face more loss in your life, and so am I, we need to be ready. We need to be prepared. We need to know what do we do? You have to, and you will have to live without someone you never imagined living without. Either real people that you've known and been in a relationship with, and two, or the idea of people that you will never be able to live with. On November 15th, it will be exactly 20 years since my mom died. And I was 25 at the time. She was 46, the age I will be on my next birthday. I've been left without. I think about the women in this epic community who have experienced the brutal reality of miscarriage or miscarriages. They've been left without. I'm intimately acquainted with children who will never again see their biological parents. They've been left without. And I have friends who never dreamed divorce would be in their reality, but they too have been left without. Who have you been left without? A parent, a grandparent, a spouse, a friend, a sibling, a child. And as you think about who you've been left without, you have a question, I think, that probably comes to your mind, especially with that initial reaction to the loss in the moment. And it's a question that we're carrying over the life of the series that we started last week. And the question at that moment of loss is this: will it always be like this? Will it always hurt this much? Will it always be this hard? Will I always feel so empty? And what I want to do today is look at a book in the Old Testament of the Bible, all about women who've been left without. That's the title of my message today, Left Without. If you go to Ruth, that's the book we're looking at in the scriptures. Even though the name of the book is Ruth, Ruth isn't the only woman in this story who's been left without. So I want you to stand with me. Let me encourage you to keep your Bible or your Bible app, whatever you kids use these days, open to Ruth the whole time, because we're just going to walk in and out of the scenes of Ruth's story. I would encourage you to go back and read it in its entirety. You could do that probably in 15 minutes before you go to sleep tonight, or when you use it for your quiet time tomorrow, whatever the case may be. But there are some massive lessons we're going to learn today. And again, as Seth prayed, I'm praying God would speak through me, around me, in spite of me. But I believe there's something he wants to communicate to us today. And I believe this on an individual level, and I believe this for us as a church community. And you'll hear why. In the days when the judges ruled, chapter 1, verse 1, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. What do you do when you've been left without? Have a seat. Let's try to really get some answers to this question. When this scene opens up, what you have is a family who's experiencing famine in Bethlehem. And so they did what you see other people doing. You see Joseph's brothers doing this in Genesis. You see it would be what we would do if we had a massive famine. We would just go to where the food is. So to go to where the food is, this family moves from Bethlehem, Judah to Moab. And just even before all the death, think about what they've been left without. They've been left without their friends who are back home. They've been left without their native culture. They've even, now this ends up being a good thing ultimately, but they've been left without their native religion. And they've been left without living in their physical dwelling that they knew, even if it was small and not much to it. It was there's no place like home, even if your home isn't all that. It's your home. So they've already been left without. And then we read that Elimelech died. Now, what's fascinating is when Naomi loses Elimelech, it's fascinating to me in verse 3. It still says this about her reality. It says she was left with 2 sons. So a brutal loss of her husband, but the text literally says she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women. One married Orpah, the other married Ruth. But after they had lived there about 10 years, both of Naomi's sons died also. So she's been left without her husband. She's been left without both of her sons. She's just been left without. Over time, what happens is Naomi gets word that there's now food again in Bethlehem, and so she begins to make her plans to return. And she says to her daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, hey, go back to your mother's household. Perhaps God will bless you with other husbands. Now, I want to ponder this thought. Now, maybe it's because Naomi was up in age and she was just being rational. But she says to them, perhaps God will provide you with other husbands. It's interesting to me that Naomi believes restoration is possible for her daughters-in-law, but maybe not possible for her. And why is it that I can believe for you more than I can oftentimes believe for myself? I can believe that God will meet you in your pain. I can believe God will provide you a new spouse. I can believe that God will provide you the children, or that your child will come back to you. And sometimes it's just hard for me to believe that he can do the same thing for me. And I want you to see the response. So verses 14 through 18, again, we're just going to move along. Here's the response after she's like, go back, maybe there will be husbands in your future. At this, they wept aloud. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Orpah's not going to get the Christmas present that Ruth will get this year from her mother-in-law. She didn't do anything wrong as far as we know. Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people, my people. Your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Listen to this. Like, when we do the marriage vows, we say, till death do us part. Ruth goes beyond that. May the Lord deal with me. Listen, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. So he's like, if you're dead, I am too. I did not commit to that when I married Shauna. Just till death of either of us does us part. Verse 18, when Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. Ruth cannot bring Naomi's husband back. She can't. Ruth cannot bring Naomi's 2 sons back, can she? But what Ruth can do and what she does do is she determines, hey, you're going to be left without a lot, Naomi. You will not be left without me. And Ruth is willing to leave all that she's known behind, and she's in her own grief to say to Naomi, I can't make them come back, but I can tell you to your face, you will never be left without me. And what Ruth did for Naomi, friends, we need to start doing for each other. It's time for all of us, and listen, we all go through stuff, and we need each other, but what sometimes happens is we get so self-absorbed in our thing over here that we don't even see anyone else, which means we can't meet the needs of anyone else. And it's meant to be back and forth. It's meant to be I give and I receive, and that's the beauty of God's invention of a church community. That's what we're here for. I want to say it this way. When people are experiencing the absence of someone special, we can provide a ministry of presence to them. Guys, when college students come from around the nation or around the world, any college students in the house, hands up high, come on. I love that. I mean, they are coming to San Francisco and to this church community from around the world. When they get here, we're not doing the replacement thing. We are not trying to replace their parents, but we are providing a ministry of presence to them, right? When someone loses a best friend, either it's death or they've been betrayed or just the season ran out, whatever the case is, we're not trying to replace their best friend. Please don't do that. Somebody in the community has lost a best friend. You're like, I'm here to be your best friend. That's not what they need. Just be their friend and listen and grieve with them. When we have someone who has just experienced divorce or they're going through a miscarriage, the best thing I think we can do is shut up and sit down and just be there. Be moved by their tears so that they see ours, so that I'm with you. I don't have language for this. I don't have promises to give you. I can't snap my fingers and make this all better, but I can provide a ministry of presence to you. I mean, guys, this is what's awesome about this global church community we have. Every Next Steps launch, we just, and again, we're not better than other churches of my friends who pastor other places, but at our Next Steps launch, we don't ask people what city they're from in the state. We don't even ask them what state they're from in the nation. We're just like, hey, can you guys tell us what countries you're from? So last week, what did we have? Holland, Thailand, Philippines, China. I mean, it's just wild. Zimbabwe, South Africa, Uganda, Nigeria. I mean, it is just incredible. And guys, we get to, as a church, provide a ministry of presence. By the way, if you're from the U.S., you don't need to feel bad about yourself. We have a place here, too. And what's true for most of us is we don't mostly have family here. And so a ministry of presence in this church community is maybe more important than it would be if we were somewhere where all of our families already lived. So we can provide that ministry. I mean, this is the beauty of foster care and adoption, is it not? To provide, we're not trying to replace biological parents, but we're making a massive commitment to go, hey, we can't be them, but we can provide an incredible presence to you in your life. This is what we want to do. For those of you who are staying for the local partner lunch in this room right after this gathering, there's free lunch, but that's not the only reason to come. Our local partners that you're going to hear from and hear how you can help, the reason they're here, the reason we support these organizations and ministries is because they are providing a ministry of presence that is so needed, especially in places that are absent, places that are poor, in places that people have experienced loss. I mean, isn't it true throughout Scripture that God really sides with those who've been left without? A couple of them I brought up, and then Will gave me a couple more in between this sermon and the one we just gave. I mean, God He shows up for the fatherless, doesn't He? He shows up for the widow. He shows up for the poor, those who've been left without, and He shows up for the stranger. And church, if we're going to orient our lives around Jesus, we can't just go, show up for me. No, we are going to be the hands and feet of Jesus to the people who are left without. This is what we have to be. I mean, isn't it James 1:27 that says true religion is this? To look after orphans and widows, to look after people who've been left without. And as I started to think about that theme, think about this. I think it's John 14 where Jesus is realizing He's about to leave the disciples and they're beginning to grieve that thing that's coming, that they're not sure how they're going to go on without Him. And He says this, I will not leave you as orphans. While God will not keep us from being left without, He promises we don't have to be left without. We don't have to be left without. So let me ask this question. What would it look like for this epic church community to live out a ministry of presence to those who've been left without. Let me give you just a few seconds to think about what would your part be in this. What would it look like for us as a church community to live out a ministry of presence to those who've been left without? And by the way, I know this isn't a secret, but listen closely. You cannot provide a ministry of presence if you're not present. And you cannot receive a ministry of presence if you're not present. I know it's been a brutal 30 months. I know we're trying to still get our mojo back. I know we've been ransacked by all sorts of things. But I'm still convinced, more than ever, that me being present to someone is the best way for me to be with someone. And the best way for you to receive presence from someone is actually to sit in the same physical space. I am for all the things. I love the fact that today I can FaceTime our son in college 2,000 miles away. I love my friends can call me. I love Zoom. I've been able to do some cool things with that just like you have, but there is nothing that substitutes for this. It just doesn't exist. So we can provide a ministry of presence. You know, what's interesting to me about Ruth's story is that when you see Ruth care for Naomi, it can get lost on you that Ruth is also grieving, isn't she? While Naomi's lost a husband and 2 sons, Ruth has lost a husband. I mean, this is massive. How in the world does she provide comfort and become a rock for Naomi when she's experienced her own loss? And it makes me think back to when my mom passed away. It was brutal for my older brother and my 2 younger sisters and I. And to be honest, I was kind of lost in my own self-absorption of grief, which makes sense, but really didn't think too much early on about, oh my gosh, my father has just lost his wife of nearly 28 years. And the reason I didn't think that is because in my grief, in my siblings' grief, my father was an absolute rock for us. And he still is. But then I had to go, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, it wasn't just us. You had a more intimate relationship than we did. You guys have been together longer than we've been with her. And I see Ruth do that, and I'm just astounded. Well, they make their way back to Bethlehem, and I want you to see who greets them upon their arrival in verses 19 through 21, and listen to the exchange. Chapter 1 still, you're like, oh man, 4 chapters, how are we going to do this? We're spending the longest in chapter 1. We'll blow through the rest. So the 2 women went on until they came to Bethlehem. That's Ruth and Naomi. Imagine those conversations on the trip. What did they say? When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." She shows up, and it's been over a decade. Keep the timeline in mind. And it says the whole town was stirred. There's a commotion. There's this homecoming crowd building as they all are starting to spread word. Look who it is. It's Naomi. It's Naomi. They're like, could this be Naomi? And she says, don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara. Now, today, more than any time that I've been alive, people are kind of changing their names. Anybody else recognize this besides me? Right? Literally, I was watching one of my favorite football teams yesterday. He changed his first name to Kool-Aid. I'm down. They lost. I don't think it's because of the name change. Naomi's not trying to do something that just is a cool cultural thing. At this moment in history, names really meant something. And the name Naomi meant pleasant. And the name Mara means bitter. What is she saying? She's saying, hey, I know how you used to know me. You were here when there was abundance. You were here when my relational tank was full. You were here when things were up and to the right in my relationships. You saw me soaring, but I have not come back as pleasant. I have come back as bitter. And she says, it was God. He took it away from me. And she says this beautiful line that is so heavy, and a lot of us have probably felt like this, even if we didn't articulate it in this beautiful way. She said, I left full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Ever felt that way? Let me ask it this way. Do you have a relational emptiness that used to be full? Let me ask it another way. You won't see this question on the screen, but for those of you who haven't yet to experience the ideas that you had and the dreams that you had and the relational stuff you've prayed for forever, let me ask you, do you have a relational emptiness that seems like it will never be full? And relational emptiness, it can come to us in lots of shapes and sizes, can it? And can I say this? I'll repeat this again. Epic family, there is no competition in this room to talk about and prove whose loss is greater. Loss is loss is loss. Can I get a witness? It's loss. Oh, but I lost this and that. It's just loss. And relational loss or relational emptiness, it can come in lots of shapes and sizes. It comes through death. It comes through divorce, doesn't it? It comes through betrayal, and it comes through friends just literally walking out on our lives. Several years ago, I had a friend who became a really close friend. It's a friend who was so close that the friend became a close friend to like everyone in my family, interacted a lot with my entire family. We did meals together. We went to ball games together. We did double dates with our spouses together. Just a super close friend in my life until he wasn't. Until he stopped answering or even returning my phone calls. Until he stopped responding to my correspondence to him. And I didn't know what to do, and I thought, the only thing I know to do, what do you do when you've been ghosted? Anybody have some of you got some sinful responses. We're not going to talk about that. I know, you're like, Ben, let me tell you. All right, tell me that out of church just so I can. I just wrote him an email, and I said, hey, I have no idea what's happened. Genuinely. Would you please let me know what I've done wrong so that I can apologize for that thing I apparently have done wrong and make it right? That was several years ago, and I still haven't received a response today. Let me give you a principle. I'm going to repeat it because it's going to hit some of you in a deep way. The death of someone you've had a close relationship with is terrible, isn't it? But friends, so is the death of a relationship with someone who is still very much alive. Let's do it again. Physical death of someone that you've been so close to, that is brutal in its own kind of way. But I think, in a little bit different way, but equally as brutal, is the death of a relationship with someone who, best you can tell, is still very much alive. Raise your hand if you've experienced that kind of death. It's brutal. They both hurt, but at least you understand why. On this one, right? I'm like, what happened? What happened? And we need to grieve it, and we need to lament it, and we need to express our pain and our frustration and our sadness and even our anger. And you look as Ruth and Naomi go on, they are back in Bethlehem now, and it is time for the barley harvest. And Ruth just so happens one day to decide to go out into the fields and take some leftover grain. And she just so happens to choose a field that belongs to Boaz, who just so happens to be related to Naomi's deceased husband. And Boaz shows Ruth amazing favor, and she asks a great question that we ask a lot of times in life. She just says to him, why? Why? Listen to his answer. Now we're in chapter 2. Verses 11 and 12. Listen to Boaz. He's answering the question to Ruth, why did you show me favor? Boaz replied, I have been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Don't you love that? Why, Boaz? Ruth, we've heard reports about you. We've heard about your ministry of presence to Naomi. We've heard about your willingness to leave everything that you knew, your family, your house, your gods, and to go all in with this woman. And Boaz says to her, I am praying that God would richly reward you. I do believe there is massive blessing on the other side of our relational commitments. And I believe we miss blessing when we choose not to be in committed relationships. Like, but Ben, it's costly. That's the whole point. The world is lying to you about you do you and you be you and whatever else. Why don't we be us and let's be in it together, come hell or high water? Why don't we go the distance with each other? Why don't we encourage each other? Hey, they may walk out on you, but I'm not bouncing on you. You might be abandoned. I will not walk away from you. Your church may have hurt you and we won't be perfect, but we're going to help heal you. Guys, this is possible. This is why we stay in a city that's hard, because we build this sort of ministry of presence together. And he's like, I pray that God will richly reward you. And then we go on to read that Boaz becomes her guardian or kinsman redeemer to Ruth. Now we're skipping way ahead to chapter 4, verse 13. You do not have to change your brunch reservations. You're like, chapter 3, go read it yourself. Boaz has become her guardian redeemer, but somewhere along the way, Boaz is like, you know that talk where you're like, hey, I want us to be more than friends? I didn't give this to 9 o'clock, but Shauna's like, hey, I want to be your best friend for the rest of your life, but I don't want more than that. And I just told her, I was like, that's lame, first of all. Second of all, I said, hey, you can, I literally said this. I said, you can be my best friend until I have a wife. And then she decided she wanted to be both, and so we've been rolling ever since. Guys, I'm not saying that's the line you should use, but it worked. And I'm so grateful. It did work in 1999. That was it sounds, you're like, oh, you're making a joke. No, this is really a true story. Seriously, she couldn't imagine somebody else being my best friend, even if she couldn't imagine being my wife. So here we are, best friends and wife. Boaz goes for more. Here we go. Verse 13 of chapter 4. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, don't miss this. This is every pastor wants lines like this. Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without. Oh my gosh, a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, this is a crazy line, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The women living there said, Naomi has a son. And they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Yes, that David. Ruth has not been fully left without. Naomi hasn't been fully left without. Naomi does not get her husband back, does she? She doesn't. Naomi doesn't get either son back, does she? Does Ruth get her husband back? No. But Ruth does get Boaz. Ruth does get a baby. Naomi does get a grandson who becomes the grandfather of King David. And if you look in Matthew 1, you'll see Ruth's name again, and a lineage that's mostly male names. She shows up there. Because down the line, it will be David, and down the line, it will be Joseph, the earthly father to Jesus. Now, let me give you a principle so that you're like, but Ben, what about all the pain? Here's the principle. While we won't usually get the person back, God can provide new relationships that bring some joy and take some of the sting away. In most scenarios. Doesn't mean we don't pray for redemption. Sometimes redemption, that ship has sailed. Can we agree? But God is able to bring new people in a way that takes off some of the sting of pain and adds some of the sense of joy that we thought we would never taste again. Anybody ever seen God do that? Bring you the taste of joy when you thought you might never taste its sweetness again? He wants to do this for all of us. This is what he does. And so what do? We grieve it. We lament over it. We start also praying for a person. We start praying for people. I love what the lady said to Naomi. There's a great phrase there. They said, this little boy is going to renew you and sustain you. Isn't that incredible? I know you've had a lot of loss, Naomi. This doesn't take that away. This doesn't replace Elimelech. It doesn't replace your two boys. But what this does is it gives you someone who's going to give you a relational reason to keep living. And we need relational reasons to keep living. And maybe what we start doing is saying, God, would you bring me relational fullness where I have some relational emptiness? And we're going to pray for people who just want to experience that relational fullness in whatever form, in a family, with a romantic situation, with a child, with friends, whatever the case may be. We're going to do that. But a couple of questions I would be asking. Number one is this. Is there someone you need to deepen your relational commitment to? And number two, so that this becomes a community that you can receive from, that means we have to be a community that gives this, what would it look like for you to become a person who provides a ministry of presence to those who've been left without? because we want this to become the norm in the community. It's exhausting when we only have 3 people in our church we can point to. Hey, you can talk to one of them. It's like, no, they're busy. We need to all become this, don't we, to some form, some fashion? So here's the question I want to end with, and this is kind of the final relational promise we need to look at. The question is this. If we can't count on relationships that will always be present, are there relational promises we can count on? Like if I can't guarantee that your husband or wife will be with you for life, if I can't guarantee that friend will stay in the game with you, if I can't guarantee that your parents will want something to do with you or your child will, I can't guarantee you any of that, what relational guarantees can I give you? And that would be a good question to ask. Well, yeah, Ben, what relational guarantees can you give me? The first one I'll give you is from Psalm 27, verse 10. The whole chapter is great, but here's verse 10. Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. So for some of you, that is literally keeping the verse the same to deal with what you're in the midst of, that pain, that loss. For a lot of us, though, it's substituting other names or other roles, right? Though that sibling forsakes me. Though my child forsakes me. Though the friend I used to have and thought I would always have forsakes me, the Lord will receive me. The Lord will receive me. And then I love Hebrews 13, verses 5 and 6. The first part, you're like, why are you telling us this? Here's what it says. Hebrews 13, verses 5 and 6. See if we can get this. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. Now, we should ask the question, why? Or we should ask the question, how? Keep your lives free from money, be content with what I have, why? Here's the because in the text. You can say it out loud with me. So we say with, give me that verse back one. So we say with, the Lord is I will not be, what can mere mortals do to me? Do you have that confidence? You're like, Ben, does that confidence mean that I don't experience pain? No. That confidence means, God, I pray that she won't leave. I pray that he will come back. I pray that they will be reconciled to me. But you know this, right? Romans 12 says this, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. But guys, anytime we're talking relationship with God or human beings, it always takes 2 to tango. And I can't make you stay in it with me. I can't make my kids stay in it with me. I can't make this woman stay in it with me. I can't make our staff team stay in it with me. I can fire them, but I can't make them. It's true. But I can't make them stay in relationship with me. But Jesus has bound himself to us. When we are faithless, he still shows up. When everyone else walks out, he walks in. When everyone else brings an absence, he always keeps bringing his presence. And I know you want more than that. Listen, it's not just Jesus is the answer, of course. We're orienting our lives around Jesus, but also we need to become the kind of church community that does 2 things. We provide a ministry of presence, but remember this. Our presence can't do in their lives what his presence can do in their lives. So in my kids' lives, I want to be the fixer, but I need to remind them who is the ultimate fixer. In my marriage, I need to do my part, but I've got to remind Shauna, hey, he can do this, he can handle this. He can take care of it. Now, the question in Ruth's story, where I literally will end, is, did she ever find this secret? Like, she comes from a place where they worshipped a different God or different gods. I want you to go back to something I showed you already. Chapter 2, verse 12. We'll wrap it up here. This is Boaz answering Ruth, why have I shown you favor? Verse 12. Verse 12. Boaz says to Ruth, may the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel. And here's the secret sauce. Under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Why could Ruth help Naomi? How are you going to bring a ministry of presence to the rest of us when we're experiencing the absence of someone? Is because you're ultimately going to find your refuge under the shadow and shelter of his wings. Ruth found that. You can find that too. Would you guys pray with me as we just move towards, what this might look like? This altar is open like it always is at any time of the service, but certainly right now. Any relational emptiness that you're in the midst of, we'll start with those who it's been a real person for. There was a parent who was alive that's not alive. There was a child who wanted a lot to do with you, but no longer. There was a friend who walked with you through so many things, and then they walked out on you. There was a sibling you knew you could count on. You were always so close, and then something happened. And you just need to start grieving that. You try to sidestep the process of grief, and you just need to start the grieving process today. Others of you, you need to open yourself back up to human beings even in this room. I know that you've been let down. I know promises have been broken, but there are still good people. There are still good men and women. We need to try relationally again. And for others of us, we are so nervous about trusting God because other people we've trusted have broken our trust. And it's time just to go, okay, God, if you really will keep your word, I want to attach my soul, my life, my future to you. I want to put myself back in your good hands, no longer insisting on taking care of myself. So, God, I pray that you would come and move. We need your help. God, we don't need it just in this moment. We need it in an ongoing way. God, would you bring relational fullness where there's been emptiness? God, would you make this community a place where we provide a ministry of presence to one another? God, you said, Jesus, that the thing that would set your disciples apart would be their love. Could we become that in here so that it spills out in our city? And it becomes known that, hey, I don't know everything about Jesus yet, but when I go to that epic church service, gosh, they see me, they're with me, they're for me, and I feel better when I'm with them. God, do what only you can do. In the strong name of Christ we pray. Amen. I want to ask you to stand. This altar is open. Is there a relational loss? Have you been left without? Some of you haven't yet been left without, but you live your life so afraid that it's coming. And I need to tell you, it's coming. It's coming. And you can still say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? Let's respond.